What's going on, everyone? I wanted to do a quick video. I don't know if you can see, I have Rousseau, the social contract here, and I hope this isn't meant to be like a super challenging video, but it is a little more foundational. So when we think of or fundamental, in the sense that if we think of like secondary text on Rousseau, I kind of want to talk about that stuff. This isn't like academia or academic in a specific sense. But I did a couple of videos on ideology and choice. I think that's a really fascinating topic, and so I wanted to touch on Rousseau and the social contract, in a couple ways that when we see historically sort of this like French socialist ideology emerging, this sort of unique form and a unique approach to democracy. Jean-Jacques Rousseau was definitely one of the sort of fathers of this. Amongst a lot of things, if you want the strict socialist definition, you can say that, and I'm not a socialist by any means, and I'm going to explain why in a second, but, there was a lot of, like power struggles and stuff like this. And, we saw like in all of its glory, like the way that like different groups, people were split apart and stuff like this. And I just want to talk about Rousseau for a second because, I'm not going to read specifically from the book, but it's in book 1 when he's talking about force and power. This is largely, I think, a response to both things that, Rousseau may have seen in the day, but also, in the political, political theory sense to Thomas Hobbes, right? Thomas Hobbes, to a large extent, as well as maybe the strict and staunch individualism of John Locke. And so what Rousseau says about power is he says, well, can we even approach or say is this a really is this a necessary conversation to talk about might makes right? And he says no. He says look, I'm gonna cover this stuff in a couple pages, a couple paragraphs. I'm going to come back and I'm going to keep kind of driving home the point that when we talk about a social contract in society, we're not talking about force really. And so what, the basic argument is that, are you compelled to listen to someone with force? And he says, well, no, because guess what? All power comes from God, but so does disease. That's his argument. That's part one of the argument, is that power comes from God, but so is disease, and no one would say that God, if you get sick, you're not allowed to call a doctor. This is Rousseau saying this. He goes on to say look, in a society, if someone's trying to rob you and you can keep your purse away from them, kind of like that old Bobby Hill, let go of my purse, I don't know you. If anyone used to watch King of the Hill, back in the day, Bobby Hill said that, and he went to Peggy self-defense courses. And Rousseau, without saying you're fighting this person off, you are necessarily cunning and responding with force and all this other stuff. He's just saying no, you don't have an obligation to listen to force in this situation. Power and force doesn't come from force; it comes from God. It's this natural religion concept. You can find it somewhere else. And we can easily see this anywhere in our lives. You can easily see that a violent, thuggish, antisocial brute isn't able to generate that much control of anything. So this is already sort of implying, this is my deeper, me trying to pull more out of this. This is already saying that there's some aspect of human faculties, especially when we take Rousseau talking about the paternal sense. This is another, in book 1, Rousseau also tells us that, hey, if, the original paternal social structure, you're going to set up rules for your family and your kid, you're never getting out of that. But guess what? You're never taking that a step further either. You can't deprive someone of their liberty. No one would stand for that. You just can't do it. We don't need to talk about it. It's not that complicated. You're not allowed to do that. Don't do that. And so when we start thinking of this role as, well, if power and force is at least partially playing this caretaker role to some extent, and we can't take that much more away from it from Rousseau. Um, and necessarily, as he starts talking about Grotius and other older societies, this is flying someplace else. But when you start talking about people making covenants, people making agreements, people making pacts, that you have this aspect of preference. And so this is just Rousseau's approach to violence in society and force to some extent. Um, the conclusion of the famous line of "Man is born free, and yet everywhere he is in chains." The conclusion to that is that if you're born into a society, if you're in a society, the entire way you got there is there's just an obstacle that was too large to get over. There's an obstacle that was too large to get over, and so there's a good chance that that was, something violent. It was a good chance that it was some other choice that comes from this relationship to force, violence, and necessity, and sort of the state of nature. And so you can't really over-index on this violence thing, because if you do, someone else is just going to say, well, the only reason this is happening is because there's something more fundamental that we are supposed to be doing. So that's not the actual problem that we're solving. We're solving something else. And yeah, so, Social Contract, super fast read. It's one of those books where you can open a random page, and he has almost these entire self-contained arguments in each section. It's free online. It's also a book if you have a library card or you have a used bookstore. It's available a lot of places if you're in college or university. Guaranteed, there's a lot of these great copies with introductions at the school bookstore. And yeah, you can see this is still I still have my college sticker and stuff on the back. My version of the Social Contract. And yeah, it's just one of those books that's easy to read. It's I think when we're talking, I would say up until kind of my early 30s, if we're talking about what society is like when I'm going to the grocery store or applying for a job or shopping for a car or something like this, well, Rousseau's kind of nailed a lot of that. We don't need I don't need a lot of the ideological reading and stuff. Just the theory is sort of, how I understand and view a society. Yeah, that's it. That stuff wins in my opinion.